Hi, everybody. We're just getting started here. Just going to put our panelists up.
I can log in on my phone and share it, or how does that work?
You should be able to do that. You should be able to find it if you click on that link. It'll also be up later and you can share it.
Okay,
I'm going to go
cool.
ahead and the recording's now started. So, um, everybody, really happy to be doing another Super Speed Golf webinar here tonight. Thanks for spending some time with us this evening at a slightly new time. I know we moved this a little bit earlier. It's mainly my fault. I'm out in the I'm out in Denver, and I've got a couple little kids, and they need to eat. But that's okay. We're going to have some fun with this tonight. We're extremely excited to have one of our really good friends, Liam Mucklow from the Golf Lab here. He's going to be talking with us about a number of different things as it relates to club fitting and how, after you start super speed training and you gain 5 or 6 miles an hour of swing speed, how much, how important it can be to take a look at the equipment that you're using and really optimize that to that new speed to get the most out of all that you're getting and really be able to apply it to the ball well. In a few of our other webinars, we've talked about those, kind of 4 big keys that we look at that affect how far a player hits a golf ball, right? We've talked about the physical side and how important that is to being able to create speed and power. We've talked about mechanics and, our speed pyramid model of how ground reaction forces and kinematics and applying that out through the arms and the club to the ball is so important to creating speed and power. We've talked, at length about the neurological component and how our brains control our bodies and how we can gain speed that way. But the one that we haven't talked about nearly as much, has been equipment. And, Liam, this is kind of something I usually say at seminars, but I'm fairly convinced that driver fitting or equipment fitting is the second fastest way to help somebody gain speed, gain distance off the tee. Would you agree with me on that?
Ooh, I might challenge. I kind of say it's usually the lowest hanging fruit. Now it depends. If someone's already been fitted, then they're going to need a lot more to it for
Well,
sure.
so I knew you were going to say that because
Yeah, I know.
Liam's
I know.
probably the absolute world expert on club fitting across every side from tour players to amateurs alike. So I knew he'd be a little biased there. So I just
Yeah.
kind of walking him into this. But so Liam, how long does a normal driver fitting usually take?
Well, as we'll talk about here, Michael, we're going to go a little more in depth in what you're going to get if you go to your big box retail store. Because, what we've done is create a 3-step process to
Yeah,
optimize the
absolutely.
key components of the club,
Yeah, and we'll
right?
talk about that. So your driver fitting takes how long though?
We take 90 minutes, but for the
Okay.
golfers out there, I also want you to know that we're still talking about 50 golf swings. So part of what we
Perfect.
do is we space out the time to make sure that fatigue doesn't become a factor as we test the different components.
Absolutely. So now, even if you're going through a much more simple process, what would you
Yep.
say is about minimum what it's going to take to get fit for a driver?
Uh, I would say that you're at least going to want to get minimum is really going to be about 40 shots. You know,
Perfect.
you,
40 shots. So we're talking
yep.
maybe if you do that quickly, half hour to 45 minutes. You
Yeah, you could
see,
bank.
our
Yeah.
protocols with super speed golf only take like 5 to 8 minutes. So we're the fastest way to get more
Oh,
speed.
yeah,
There
yeah,
we
yeah.
go. I
Okay,
told
now
you
I
I could
get the
prove it.
now I get the setup. Now I get the
Okay, there it
setup.
is.
All
It's
right.
okay. You walked into it a little bit. That was good. So without further ado, everybody, I'm gonna let Liam turn over to some slides that he's prepared for everybody tonight on just some of that real cutting edge type information on equipment fitting and how that's gonna affect. Once you get, like I said, get that 5% gain in swing speed from working with super speed golf. Here's what you need to do next in order to really maximize your actual distance off the tee gain from that. So Liam, let's take it
Yep.
away.
Okay. All right. Let me get this going here. You guys can see my screen, and we'll start this slideshow. So, and the first thing, before we even get into, the mechanics of how we optimize driver at the Golf Lab, I think it's so important, when you put in the work, the time and energy to make those significant gains in club head speed. Around the lab, we always say, like, you have earned the right to be fitted. You put the work in, so let's make sure you get absolutely the most benefit out of the work that you've done. So if you come see us up there at the lab in Toronto, I'm going to walk you through sort of what we do. And what we do is not, we didn't really invent much of anything, but we took a lot of ideas from a lot of the best players in the world, the best coaches in the world, and tried to roll them into something that we can deliver to, amateur enthusiast golfers. We do, however, use, R&D grade tools. So if you look in the top left, every driver head that hits the market, we measure the center of gravity. In the bottom left, we actually measure the curvature in the face. The top center, you can see how we actually profile each shaft that comes on the market. And we built our own brand agnostic fitting system. So, while we do go absolutely over the top, you don't need to be completely over the top to get, really good part of the way there. This is, I just think that's cool. So we put it in there. That's a phantom camera. That's 10,000 frames per second driver impact we're testing. So, the first thing that I want everyone to think about out there, if you haven't, is when you go get fitted for a driver, make sure you ask the fitter to let you try different lengths of shaft. Okay, if you can think about all of the people there that are on this webinar, I think it's kind of irresponsible for us to assume that you're all going to perform best with the same length of shaft. That is one of the core properties of the golf club. And what our research has shown is that it really ties a lot into both your swing style, but also the mechanics of your arm. And if you think about it really in its simplest format, what we found is for players that tend to have a shorter arms, they actually perform better with a longer than standard club. And players with longer arms tend to perform better with a shorter than standard club. So again, just if you're going to go and get fitted, as you should, after you made your club speed gain, make sure you test more than one length of driver. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go through and we want to test the weight, right? And when it comes to training protocols, Mike and Kyle and the guys at SuperSpeed, they've done their homework. They know absolutely what is best for how to train your mechanics and how to train your physical capacity in order to generate more speed. Now, the research we do is a little different. We research what happens when the person actually goes to strike the golf ball, right? And now all of these things about outcome and experience and, the shot shape intention all come into play. And so when we go through and we do our driver testing, our research has led us to test 4 different weights. And it's a 45, 55, 65, and 75 grams. So what we found is in our testing, only 12% of the golfers that we've tested have the highest club head speed with that 45. And what happens is a lot of times they just lose that good transition sequence. So the research shows us that the shaft weight where the golfers get the fastest club head speed is the one where they still initiate the downswing with the pelvis, with the lower body. And that's why so many of the super speed training protocols that you've been doing train that into your mechanics. So if you've been doing your protocols, there is a good chance that you could be part of that 12% and get the double benefit of maintaining efficient sequence while still using the lightest possible club. Once we've optimized, the shaft, the length and weight, say the engine of the club head, this is where we go through and we test out different club heads. Now, these are, some high-tech samples from our club spec database, but the center of gravity location and the curvature of the face are the 2 key components of the club head that we want to make sure we optimize for each player. And again, here we like to test 3 different heads that, suit the player's eye and match the characteristics they're looking for. So we're always going to go shaft length, and we're going to go shaft weight, and then we're going to get to the club head and see what performs best for that shaft. When it comes to, let's say looking at some of the actual, delivery traits that we see in some of the best players, and when it comes down to making a recommendation, especially for, I'll say a lot of the mid to higher handicap players out there. This is a graphic we put together a couple years ago when we were building out our tour data set. To me, it speaks volumes, because when we look at all of our PGA Tour player data, which is 5 major champions, we've got over 50 international wins and 26 players in those database. The most consistent launch monitor across all players is consistency of impact point. Okay, and so what I mean by that is, we have a LPGA major champion with a club head speed of 92. We have a U.S. Open champion that has a very low club head speed of 108 miles an hour. We've got tour players that have 128 miles an hour. We've got amateur players that have 120 miles an hour. Some hit draws, some hit fades. But every elite player we have ever measured hits the ball in the center of the club face every single time. So, I go on about that a little bit because, that is the most important thing to getting the benefit out of the training you've done with SuperSpeed, out of that extra 5 to 10 miles an hour club head speed. And your driver fitting should revolve around getting maximum speed from center contact. Now, here's a little practical example we put together. So let's say you've got your Titleist driver, you hit it right in the center with that green dot. Now, let's say we're playing Pebble Beach because it's a nice place to play golf. So if you hit it 250 yards up the middle on 18, right out that green dot, that's what you're going to be left with, right? Pretty nice place to play the hole from. But now here's that same driver head. And let's imagine we've got impact points that are 10 millimeters, about a ½ inch to the toe and a ½ inch to the heel. Now, when we miss that far outside of the sweet spot, gear effect is not predictable. It might gear out and come back. There's a good chance it won't. The engineers say the club head loses compliance. So at a 250-yard drive, there's a 34-yard difference in the lateral projection of where that red dot and that blue dot are pointing. And remember, that's because the club face on your driver is curved. It is not flat. You're going to get up to an 8-mile-an-hour drop in ball speed, which basically negates all that work you put into gaining more club head speed. And, 24-yard loss in distance, about 10%. That's where it's so important to get that benefit, hit it out the middle. Here's what that looks like back on Pebble Beach, right? So the toe of the club was pointed 20 yards shorter in the right-hand bunker, and the heel of the club was pointed in the ocean. That same club head speed, that's the same face angle, sweet spots pointed in the exact same direction, right? Same club path, right? Same angle of attack, same impact, and different impact point. That's what we've got. So absolutely. Let's hit it out the middle. Now here's just a couple, pieces I thought that the viewers might find interesting, Mike. We've got, right here, we were talking about this earlier. I hear a lot of people talking about how, if I go to a shorter driver, I get more control. Well, you know what? Some people do and some people don't. So this is from when we were testing Graham McDowell, and, you can see his ball speeds here. And we've got shaft length of 43, 44, 45, 46. So if we look at the TrackMan data on the right-hand side, his gamer driver was yellow, right? And then the other 45-inch driver was also yellow. The 47, this brown one, was pretty good, but it got going left. He hates when it sees it go left. What was so interesting, though, is the 46, this red one here, not only was it longer than what he was getting with his 45-inch, but it was also straighter. So I think it's important that if you do go out and get fitted by a driver, don't fall into the trap of this I'm air quoting common knowledge that shorter is straighter and longer is more crooked. It's just the data doesn't confirm that. And so here's kind of the results of our study. And I want everyone to pay attention to the far right-hand column, okay? So if you look all the way to the right-hand side of that table, you see the club length of, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. And to the right of that is the percentage of people in the study that length performed best for them. So, at that time, our standard driver length was 45 inches. That's what, if you went into Dick's Sporting Goods, you were going to find the drivers at 45 inches. Less than 25% of people we tested performed better with that. So at the very least, do yourself a favor when you go see your local club fitter, make sure you test a 44, a 45, and a 46, and that covers a broad spectrum of the population. Okay. Now, the next thing we started to track, we said, was club weight. So I'm going to provide you with 3 tour examples of what we found. Now, when I first met Graham, that's his data that just popped up, he was using a Japanese shaft called a Miyazaki. It was about 52 grams. Let's see there, his club head speed was 106.9. And as we increased the weight, 55, 65, 75 grams, we got a spike of 2 miles an hour, right? So that'd be a nice little benefit to, you know, the 5 to 10 that you've already gained to fine tune it that way. So he got faster by going a little heavier. Now here's our next one. This is Ben Crane. So the middle row, that teal color, BC, that's his initials, and driver-gamer. He was using a 53 gram Mitsubishi Basara at the time. And you can see the speed there was 102. His club head speed continued to go up. As we got to 78 grams, he gained 5 miles an hour of club head speed. So his transition sequence got much more effective. And this was such an outlier that we actually quit testing for that day, you know, slept on it, went back, and the results replicated themselves again, which I found quite interesting. Now, this, I think, is particularly relevant on the right here. That's 3-time major champion Padraig Harrington. Now, for those of you that don't know Padraig, he is an absolute speed freak, right? So he would do crazy stuff like swing a badminton racket in his backyard for an hour a day in Dublin to keep his wrist speed up. So, you know, similar to what each one of you out there has gone through by doing the training protocols with SuperSpeed, he's put in the work to own the efficient sequence, you know, all those gains that Mike and the boys talk about. So with him, it wasn't really a surprise that he got the fastest club head speed with the lighter shaft because he's trained those efficient movements. So he gets the benefit of that in addition to maintaining efficiency with the lightest club. So I just wanted to kind of, I guess, start with some of that information, Mike. There's my slide there. So hopefully, you know, for everybody out there, they arms you with the questions you need to get the most out of the club fitting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, if you want to go ahead, so everybody that's here, you know, please feel free if you have some questions for us. If you can type them in the chat here on the meeting, Mike's going to be watching for those questions, and we'll definitely answer some of those here coming up. As we're getting some of those in, though, Liam, you know, I would say, you know, coming from that background of, you know, owning a golf academy and doing a lot of equipment fitting, I agree with you completely on the side that, like, centerness of contact is really what it's all about. Like, I think sometimes when you go into a fitting, too much of it is built on, okay, well, here's spin rate and here's your club speed and here's ball speed and all these different things that are there. And I think all of those can be a major resultant in many ways of just that player making sure that they're always hitting the ball in the center of the face.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think, you know, obviously there's some, you know, some really good applicable technical information in that PowerPoint, but I think one of the most important things for everybody out there, if, you know, you're going to go get fitted, you know, I want to recommend to each of you guys that you really control the environment, you know, so right when you go in, you know, I think that you can ask your fitter some very good questions at the start. Like before I would book the fitting to pay my money, I would ask them, do you have driver shafts that are different lengths? And if the answer is no, I'd say, well, you know what, I appreciate that. I'm going to call someone else.
Right.
You know, do you have driver shafts that are of different weights? Right? Do you have those things? And then, you know, when you come in to the actual fitting, the simplest way that I could recommend you to guide the fitter's decision-making process is to say, I would like the driver that gives me the best strokes gain performance on the golf course. So strokes gained, for the people out there that aren't like so familiar deep into the stats, that's a way of kind of normalizing and blending both distance and accuracy to how is this going to perform on the golf course. So if you hit, you know, if you hit 4 drives with really good launch and spin with one driver, and then you hit one ball 30 yards right, and then the next driver you have more spin, but, you know, all 5 balls are in play, that driver is going to give you better scores on the golf course.
Yep, agreed. Mike, do we have any questions yet?
We do. The first question is going to be from Peter. He says, At what stage of the super speed training would you get fitted, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question. Let me pull up a different PowerPoint here. I'm going to show you a chart that I think will answer that question in a very, very clear way. Give me 2 seconds here, and then I'll share my screen. All right. Back to Zoom.
Liam, can you talk just a second a little bit about how they're measuring centerness of contact and what equipment does that and what you recommend during the fitting?
Yeah, I mean, we so our preferred technology for club fitting is a Foresight GC Quad. So that's an optical launch monitor that uses 20,000 frame per second camera in order to actually measure the impact point. So if you're at an outdoor fitting, a good chance that they're going to use radar. TrackMan's newest software, it calculates the impact point as well. It's not quite as reliable, but it's pretty darn good still. If you're not in a place where you can access that type of technology, then definitely go with strike spray. Right, super simple.
Yeah, what's the difference in price point between those options?
It's actually not that much. I think it's only about $23,992 less for strike spray.
Yeah, so that one is a pretty effective way to look at center of contact. Just so you guys know, like the entire reason we launched Strike Spray a couple years ago was because we feel it's so important to actually getting result out of the speed gains you have to hit it in the center of the face. And if you can't tell where you're hitting it on the face, it becomes very, very difficult. All right, let me show everybody this real quick.
Sorry, I'm going to do one last plug for the Strike Spray there, Mike. I love the fact that you guys actually put work in to modify an existing product to make sure that it doesn't mess with the spin rate. And so when you use it, you still get true representation of ball flight.
That was a huge point of what we didn't want it to do. No face.
I know.
Not real sticky on there to mess it up.
Yeah,
well,
like impact tape was always the thing that I hated that number because you could never get. It would basically add too many shots to the fitting, right? Like if I wanted to measure center of contact at different points, I basically had to hit 2 or 3 more shots to measure it, and I couldn't even use those as launch monitor data. Where with like the spray, it's a lot easier because you can actually use those effectively the whole time.
The face tape changes the spin rate so much. I remember, this is going back like 1999, one of my first years as a club pro, and I fitted someone for a driver. It went fantastic. We used face tape. The driver came in, and as a good player came back in, and he's like, this isn't the same driver. I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? We couldn't figure it out. I went with him on the course. We looked at it. Then I put the face tape back on, and it performed excellent.
Yeah. It's like, wow, the dampening of that 500 RPMs of spin just made a huge difference, didn't it?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a big one. So if your fitter has face tape, recommend Strike Spray to them. So to get back to that question, though, as far as when you should get fit for golf clubs doing your SuperSpeed training, I've got a really simple way to think of that. So we have 3 different stages in the training of what you're going to expect when you start doing this. Because this is a neurological training, you see change very quickly. In fact, we see that 5% jump in swing speed usually after the very first session that you do the actual training. So on this chart, that blue line represents your club speed if you measured some on a launch monitor before you did overspeed training. The red line is the club speed immediately after that overspeed training. So after that first session, we call that jump phase, right there. So then over the next 6 to 8 weeks of regular training, if you continue to measure this, those before numbers will gradually creep up toward what that jump number was after the first session. In 6 to 8 weeks, we call that a normalization phase. At the end of that, where the before and the after speeds are relatively the same, we basically see that that player has entered a plateau phase in the training. Once you're into that plateau phase, we look at that as a time when those speed gains are relatively permanent, but that's also a great time to get fit for golf clubs because now you're not seeing these big changes before and after, and kind of things have stabilized. And once they've stabilized, now it's a good time period to get all the clubs in your bag fit around those new club speed numbers. This is what we do with our tour players on a regular basis. Also during those plateau phases, if you're a player that plays a lot of competitive tournaments, you want to be in a plateau phase during competitive tournaments. Because, well, I can ask you this too, Liam. Like, yeah, you know, you do a lot in the baseball world now. Like,
Yeah.
20 feet over the fence is pretty good in baseball. Like, 20
Yeah.
feet further over the fence, right? Like, baseball players never complain about that. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I mean, most of the guys that we had coming through today, you know, when you ask the player, hey, like, what are you looking for? Well, they want exit velocity.
Yeah, so if the ball goes 20 feet further over the fence, that's a good thing for them. See, in
Yeah.
golf, it's a little harder because 10 yards over the green sucks. Like, you need to know how far your clubs go, right? That's a major part of high performance in golf. So if you're in one of those normalization phases where things might be different, those are times when we don't really recommend doing that training right before a competitive round because we want you to be stable when you're out on the course. But getting into those plateau phases is a great way to know how far your clubs go and to get everything kind of dialed in. And then, you know, depending on the length of your season, we can even sort of extend those plateau phases. And then in more of an off-season type area, we'll press the protocols forward. We'll really try to get secondary jumps down the road. But yeah, that's definitely a piece of the periodization of this training and exactly when you want to get fit for clubs is during those plateaus. Okay.
All right, let's see. Looks like we got some questions filling up here.
Yeah, go for it there, Mike. What we got?
So the next one comes from Anthony. He asks, how does shaft bend profiles fit into your process?
Is that for, I'm thinking that one's maybe more for me. What do you think there, Mike?
Yeah, that one's all you, Liam. Go for it.
All right, well, so this, it really, to be honest, at the consumer level, it doesn't. And I'm going to explain why. You know, we do robot testing every single year, and I 100% understand that robots are not humans. But we tested 80 SKUs of shaft on the exact same head calibrated in a robot. And, you know, we saw 72 of them do the exact same thing. We saw 4 of them increase launch angle by about 0.6 degrees, and 4 of them reduce launch angle by about 0.5 degrees. So after we got that data, you know, we felt like given the amount of time that people have, the amount of swings they have, what's a reasonable investment to get fitted, that wasn't going to be the best use of time, money, and swings. So the fitting system we built, we've designed our own shaft with Acra. We've modified a bend profile. So when we adjust head weight for swing weight, we get no change in frequency for a driver anywhere from 44 inches to 47 inches. So that's where it lands for us.
Yeah, I agree with you too. So I think to simplify that a little bit is that I think some of the things that are commonly looked at by club fitters, what we're finding is that the research does not support that those are really the most direct factors to having big influence on your ability to hit the ball further with that particular club or perform better. You know, that's why when Liam was talking about, you know, length and weight and then some of those characteristics of the head, those are things that are far more important to look at in that order than some of the more commonly thought of things like bend profile, the specifics on flex and things. There's a lot of factors there that I would say, as you would say, Liam, are low-hanging fruit that some fitters never even look at.
You know, when we're dealing with our tour players and they don't pay for product, once we found your sweet spot, like, okay, you're 45.75 inches, 65 grams, like, heck yeah, try every bend profile out there for that, you know, that fine tuning that race car that is your golf swing. But yeah, just the data has showed us that it's not going to be the most significant effect on the golfer.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, what's next?
So we got an interesting one here from Blaine. He's asking, what's the best course of action for fitting junior players? I understand SuperSpeed has equipment and protocols for juniors, but growth spurts, speed windows, etc., being so variable, what's the best course of action?
Yeah, good question. It's one that we get a lot as we travel around the world, and we're actually going to be starting to do the research on it this summer. It's a challenge that, you know, I think there's finally starting to be some manufacturers that do a good job making quality product in junior appropriate head weights in order to be able to hit swing weight. Flynn Golf comes to mind.
Mhm.
So in terms of us, junior just quite frankly is not our market. So at this point in time, we don't really do much of anything because we don't know what we're doing and we don't have junior clients. So
Yeah, and I
sorry
think,
about that.
no, to put a little bit of info there, I think there's got to be a balance between how often you're changing the clubs, because that will have some effect on the motor programs for those kids as they're going. This is something we did a lot at our academies, but it's important to always balance how often you're changing the clubs with always having clubs that are not negatively affecting the player's movement. So I think if you can, and I think the biggest issue there is heavy. If you get stuff that is too heavy for the kids, that is the number one worst thing you can possibly do to the developmental biomechanics of a junior golfer. So I think that's number one. You always want to error light, and you want to balance how often you change those clubs to the skill development that player's having. Because one could say that, well, every time that player gains X amount of inches or weight or length or height or whatever those sort of things are, we should immediately go into that next set of clubs. Well, I would disagree with that on the side from a motor development standpoint. They need enough time with those equipment pieces. Every time you make that change, there has to be adaptation to that new equipment. And some of that can slow down the motor learning process of actually learning some of the skill development in golf. So error light, never get too heavy, and always balance how often you're changing those clubs so that can maximize their skill development.
Perfect. And then I got two questions that are somewhat interrelated to that same topic there, Mike. So from Jeff and Willie. Jeff's first question is, since parents are very concerned with the cost of equipment, what strategy would you use in the case of developing junior golfers who are consistently getting faster? And then to that point, Willie asks, for juniors, should we continue the protocols as they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the junior protocols on the website are specific. They're similar in some ways to the adult protocols, but they also are a little bit altered for kids. They have lower reps and things like that. It's always a struggle. I think Liam mentioned that it's a hard market to deal with junior club fitting because there has to be a balance there. Like if a
for
player
Jeff's questions, that's a little more in the wheelhouse of, so we start to typically get juniors when they're 13, 14, getting serious about competition. And then they sort of find our way to our place. At that stage, they've usually also graduated into using, call it an adult, a variety of an adult club, say club head weight. And one strategy is to explain to the parents that, we can start with this custom build this year. If there's a growth spurt or need for change, the club heads will still be good. So it's a matter of adjusting shaft weight and flex to meet the development of the golfer, and we can adjust the lie angle to fit for growth and postural changes. Yeah. If you have a large and stable junior program, then I would look to try and get creative and have some sort of a consignment program. For me at my academy, I certainly wouldn't want to tie up revenue and having used club inventory. But, I think that, actively promoting to other, juniors that like, hey, here's a set of clubs that so-and-so had last year. They're great. They could be great for you if we tweak this and that. Could be something to help the parents out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Next question is from Jerry. And I think this is going to be between the two of you guys. He was saying that he read somewhere that LPGA players tend to hit up on the golf ball, whereas PGA Tour players tend to hit down a degree or two. Any suggestions for myself? I swing around 93 miles an hour. So maybe talk about the differences between why that might be occurring, whether it is the way in which they are fit as well as tend to swing, as well as somebody who's right around that 93 mile an hour speed and how he can gain some more.
You want to shoot at that one first, Liam?
Yeah, sure. So I guess to start, so that sounds like it came from 2014 PGA, LPGA Tour TrackMan averages that were published. I'll say first off, if you guys haven't picked up already out there, I'm a big technology geek, and the technology that measures it is a lot different now, and it would give a little bit of a different reading that would be more to the upside. That being said, the way I would describe it is for the ladies at that average of 93, they kind of have to hit up to hit the ball far enough to compete. And when I look at the guys where there's minus 1.4 down, you know, that's because if you've got enough speed, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? When it comes to playing the golf course, like if you're Brooks Koepka and you can move it at 125 miles an hour, or Gary Woodland, and you decide that you want to spin it at 4,000 and hit 5 degrees down on your driver, guess what? You can do that and still get away with it because you've got that speed. So, you know,
like
if you were,
put that, speed's important.
yeah, like that's it. Like if you have the speed, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? You know, so I think first off, I would caution any golfer out there that is going to go down a path of making a significant change to angle of attack, because I've seen so many people ruin themselves on it. Not to say it can't be done, but I see a lot of times people chase one number on a launch monitor and they screw a lot of other things up. You know, if maximizing distance was absolutely your most important concern, yeah, 93 miles an hour, I would probably like to see you have an angle of attack of about 6.5 degrees up and use a 9.5 degree driver, delivering the loft at about 13.5 dynamic loft.
Yeah. So, and I think
so,
I completely agree with you. Like, if we look at the physics of just the ballistic side of this, of what's going to be absolutely optimal as far as maximizing distance, we've found that hitting up on the ball is definitely in that category. However, if you're a player that right now hits 2 degrees down on a golf ball with 110 mile an hour swing speed, and you think it's a good idea to try to hit 5 degrees up on the golf ball and go through that process, just let you know that that coaching process, that training process to change that is going to have some pain involved, and it's not going to be easy. And sometimes there's actually a much more effective path, depending on your goals, of taking that 2 degree down attack angle, altering some of the equipment components that you're actually playing with there to reduce spin, with still having that 2 degree down attack angle that the biomechanics of your body are used to, and that motor program and skill development is used to. And we may be able to get you a lot more distance without actually having to change that angle of attack number nearly as much. Would you agree with that, Liam?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's rarely is changing angle of attack the most efficient option for results.
All right, Mike, what's next?
Perfect. So another question, most likely for Liam. Wesley asks, if you tend to hit the ball low in the club face, would a driver with a low CG help, and vice versa?
Yeah, Wesley, here's the reality, and you know, I hope it's not an unfortunate answer on there for you, but it depends. And what I mean by it depends is what we've seen is that half the people out there do what we call chase the CG. And what I mean by that is it's like the lower I move the CG, the lower they move the impact point. And the higher I move the CG, the higher they move the impact point. So, you know, the thing that I would recommend you to do when you go get fitted for a driver is, you know, use some strike spray, get a low CG driver, say like a Maverick Sub-Zero, and then say get a high CG driver like a Sim Max, and see which one gives you better impact point. And then from that, deduce where the numbers are and let the fitter guide loft options and stuff like that.
Great. A question for you, Mike, from John. He says, I'm working on a swing overhaul right now. Should I blend in SuperSpeed protocols while my mechanics are changing, or should I get my mechanics down before I ramp up my training?
I'd answer that this way. I would definitely recommend starting overspeed training during the process of changing mechanics. One of the primary reasons I say that is that when you're in that process of changing mechanics, the chance that you're going to get into a position where your brain starts limiting your body's athleticism, just from a standpoint of trying to hit positions or trying to train mechanically, I think one of the best things you can do for yourself during that time is to do something else that reminds you to be athletic, to be efficient with your golf swing, and to remember the overall totality of that movement as one large athletic movement and not just a series of small components that you might be trying to change mechanically. I think that's an incredibly important factor and something that I would say almost as like a secondary effect of the super speed golf training helps you just get out of your own way with the technique side of it and allows you to still work athletically and efficiently.
Yeah, I'll second that one. And for John, if you're out there still watching, I just I'm a coach first and foremost, and I just look at equipment as a way to improve performance, and have taken a little different perspective on it. I always get scared when I hear swing overhaul because, as Michael said, I think about positions. And I think super speed, it can be such an important thing if you are trying to really rebuild that motor pattern, that you don't get trapped in trying to make a 7 or 8 checkpoint swing.
If anybody has any other questions, please type them in the chat box or in the Q&A panel.
All right. Well, that sounds good. I think that may be our last question. That's okay. I think we're kind of wrapping up here anyway. I do really want to thank Liam for coming on with us tonight. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you. I always enjoy our conversations wherever we are around the world.
Yeah.
Liam, if people wanted to find some more stuff out about the Golf Lab and your everything that you're doing, where can they look to find that?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I'm going to type it in the comments here. So there's at the Golf Lab on Instagram. The Golf Lab on Facebook are great ways. And you could, if you want to follow me and see what goofy stuff I'm up to, there's social media handles for myself. Website, I'll throw in here mygolflab.ca, and our new one. If you happen to be a baseball fan out there, you definitely are going to want to check out and see what we're doing there at the BPL.
Yeah, outstanding. No, like I said, Liam and I have been friends for a long time, and we always like to talk shop when we get to things. My favorite thing though, and we'll end it on this, is that if you ever do meet Liam in person and he gives you a business card, all it says is mad scientist on it. So I think that's pretty cool. There's only a handful of people in the world that I can see would ever be able to do that. So anyway, thank you very much again for attending our webinar tonight. We appreciate you spending time with us. Again, superspeedgolf.com, at superspeedgolf on all platforms. If there's ever anything we can do to help you with the training, or if you have any other questions about our products or how to gain swing speed, please reach out, and we'll be in touch very soon with the topics for our next webinar. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you soon.